not a mirror, nor a mystic. Inside the unspoken dynamics of healing, projection, and power in equine-assisted services. The farm and I survived last week's heat wave. Summer camp swam smoothly through the humidity, and the horses and I drooped in the shade together like cynical, wilted lettuces thirsting for an afternoon storm. But when the rain came, the winds were ferocious, and the lightning crackled around the metal barn roof. The storms brought only temporary relief from the heat. This is summertime in the American Deep South. I forget that my great-grandmother's house didn't have air conditioning, not even a window unit, when I moved into it in the early 90s. I forget that I once drove vehicles that were cooled by open windows, and my ferocious need to try to outrun myself, to be anywhere else than where I was. Which brings me to today's topic, transference. That particular human ability to ask another human or animal to hold all the projections and internal demons that we haven't yet noticed inside ourselves or figured out how to tame. Before we dive into that, please take a moment to explore last week's installment of my Regathering series. You can find links to it in the show notes. These are auditory journeys that bring my farm to you wherever you are in the world. So far, I've helped you stand beside a horse, and I've welcomed you through the front gate of the farm. These visualizations are part of a growing library, and our paid subscribers to Stable Roots can find workbooks for each recording. Now, let's get started. When the healer can't say no. Transference is a familiar topic in psychotherapy. How a client begins to unconsciously cast the therapist in the role of someone from their past. The mother who wasn't safe, the father who never listened, the friend who disappeared. It's a known phenomenon, and it's part of the architecture of healing. Therapists are trained to notice transference and hold space for it without reinforcing the illusion. But when the therapist has 4 legs, when the therapist is a horse, where does the energy of transference go? Over the past few decades, horses have become valuable tools in the healing industries. The work spans from the clinical to the spiritual. Some programs promise transformation, and others lean hard into connection. Sometimes the work is overseen by teams of therapists and horse experts. Sometimes it's guided by a whim. Sometimes the work is a riding instructor talking a person through frustration. But what binds all these modalities is a deeply hurting populace that arrives in a whirlwind of dysregulation with a passion for connecting with a horse. We say we want relationship, but often what we want is a response. We want something we can read, something we can control, something that confirms our journey instead of calling it into question. And yet no other species is asked to hold human trauma in this way. We don't expect our cats to become symbols. We don't stand before our dogs and ask for spiritual validation. Well, at least most of us don't. We don't walk into a forest and ask the trees to mirror our heartbreak. But we ask it of horses, and when they don't comply, when the session slows down, or the horse shuts down, or when we don't feel the buzz of progress, we feel betrayed. The horse becomes the projection screen, the altar, the battlefield, the mother, and the mirror. We cast them in the role of the wise one, the healer, the empath, and when they don't cooperate, when they offer something more ambiguous or mundane, we accuse them of resistance, or we ghost them. We go looking for a better horse or a more tuned-in herd. We take our unfinished story and carry it elsewhere, always searching for the creature who will carry it perfectly. World champion equestrian Kim Walnes has also been doing animal communication work for years. And in a recent podcast conversation, she said something that gave voice to a feeling that's been nagging me. She said, the horses are asking us to not put them on a pedestal. They don't want to be deified. They want to be seen as they are. Horses aren't archetypes or oracles. Horses are not here to be the sole carriers of our healing. Tamar Reno echoes this from another line of wisdom. She reminds me often that many indigenous people, specifically the American Indian communities she walks with, are asking not to be placed on pedestals either. She reminds me that idealizing a people, a culture, or a creature often coexist with ignoring their grief. That being put on a pedestal is another kind of erasure. It's lonely work for a demographic still being held in generational trauma. We don't see the horse's grief. We see their stillness and call it peace. We see their silence and call it wisdom. But what if they're just holding it all because no one else will? What if we're not ready to admit that the transference goes both ways? That in asking horses to hold and instigate our becoming, we've asked them to stay stuck in our stories, while we also stay stuck in our stories. There's a difference between witnessing and carrying. The horse can be a witness, they already are, but when we ask them to carry the full weight of our projected healing arc, to be the mirror, the medicine, the mystic, the mother, we miss the chance to be in a real relationship with them. We make them containers, not companions. And in doing so, we risk repeating the very thing we came here to heal. What is transference? Transference is an unconscious process where human clients project old relationship patterns and roles onto their therapist. It's closely aligned with enmeshment. Enmeshment refers to relationships that have become so intertwined that boundaries are non-existent or identical. While this concept most often occurs between a primary caregiver and their child, it can also happen in romantic relationships or any relationships. Although enmeshment can initially lessen worries around abandonment and rejection, ongoing enmeshment can lead to resentment and low relationship satisfaction. So recognizing the signs can lead to more understanding and ultimately healthier relationships. And that description of enmeshment comes from the Attachment Project, and I'm linking to that in the show notes. What are some signs of transference happening? Idealization, where we view the therapist or horse as all-knowing, infallible, or having special insight into one's soul. Dependency, feeling emotionally reliant on the therapist or the horse for validation, decisions, or self-worth. Over-identification, believing the therapist or horse just gets me in a way that no one else ever has early in the relationship. Emotional intensity, experiencing unusually strong feelings, positive or negative, toward the therapist or the horse that feel out of proportion to the actual interaction. Reenactment, playing out unresolved childhood dynamics, for instance, craving approval, fearing abandonment, seeking punishment. Sudden disillusionment, idealizing the relationship and then abruptly devaluing or cutting it off when expectations aren't met. Jealousy or possessiveness, wanting exclusive attention or feeling threatened by the therapist or horse's relationship with others. Projection of parental roles, treating the therapist like a mother or a father or a child figure, or assuming the horse has a caretaker or a savior role. Strong reactions to boundaries, feeling wounded, abandoned, or rejected when healthy limits are set. And resistance masked as blame, saying this isn't working anymore or the horse doesn't like me when deeper material is surfacing. Stable Roots is where I share stories about horses, resilience, and the life I've built from both. I write weekly about connection, healing, and the messy, beautiful business of showing up. You can subscribe for free and follow along, but a paid subscription goes even further by directly supporting the farm, the horses, and the work we do here every day. However you choose to be a part of this community, I'm just grateful that you're here. When the instructor becomes the container. I started out as a normal riding instructor, teaching people in the old school way of pushing the horses and the humans to their limits. Emotions had no place in the riding ring. And as time went on, I realized that riding had a way of bringing up all the old stuff that people didn't realize they were carrying. I became more than an instructor when I realized that technical skills weren't enough and that the real work was happening in our nervous systems. So I spent years doing my own work, an ongoing, never-finished process. And I sought out the tools my instructor certification never mentioned: somatic awareness, coaching frameworks, spiritual integration. I didn't have all the answers, but I was better equipped to handle the things that naturally happen when humans and horses come together. I knew that the horses were carrying projection. It was part of what made the work so potent and also so precarious. What I didn't see and didn't have the training to prepare for was how often that projection bleeds over, ricocheting off the horse and hitting me square in the chest. As the instructor, the coach, the guide, I become the fallback container, the human-shaped vessel for everything the horse can't or won't hold. And when someone's image of the horse's savior cracks, it's often me who catches the fallout, the blame, the silence, and the baffling rage. Since Hurricane Helene tore through my region and my body burned itself down in response, I've lived through an avalanche of projection and departure. People couldn't find the rhythm they were used to, the structure they depended on, and when I didn't resume the role they'd assigned me, when I stepped back to rebuild, to feel, and to recover, I became the villain. The story changed. And the grief of being misunderstood, of being reduced to someone else's unmet needs, has been harder to bear than the storm damage. Because it shouldn't be mine to bear. But when people confuse access with intimacy, or support with identity, they can't tolerate the real me, especially if I'm no longer willing to contort myself to match their script. If I'm experiencing this, what kind of fresh hell are we asking the horses to hold when we force them to do this work? My own experience pushed me to look harder at the industry, at my sessions, and at the horses. I started asking questions most equine-assisted modalities seem unwilling to face. What are we really doing with the horses? And why aren't we talking about the psychological load they're being asked to carry? Not just from clients, but from practitioners too. I brought these questions to my friend and mentor, Sarah Finley of Upcountry Counseling, a gifted therapist who happens to love horses but doesn't romanticize them. We'll be co-leading workshops soon, but in this conversation, I was venting. I told her I'd started to notice a deeper pattern behind the chaos and confusion that kept surfacing in my sessions, an eerie consistency in how clients unraveled or lashed out when the horse or I stopped mirroring what they needed. Without missing a beat, Sarah named it transference. Then she said, EMDR and CBT don't have a face. They don't have a body. No one walks into a session asking to pet CBT or to spend some extra time with EMDR. You can't befriend them, and you can't get mad at them when they walk away. But with the horses, we blur all the lines, even in a simple riding lesson. We say it's therapy or a hobby or our passion, but we treat the work like it's a relationship. And when the illusion breaks, the horses can't speak, and I get left holding the confusion. When the therapist can't walk away. The horses are here with us because we put them behind fences and expect them to stay. They were placed in these pastures, brought into these barns, and enrolled in these programs. They're here because people built systems that rely on their availability and their silence. We call it care, but at the root, it's containment. They stand in floodwater, they stand in heat waves and winter storms, and in the kind of human projection that would crush a lesser species. They stand in the middle of emotional chaos and spiritual performance. They show up for people who want transformation without discomfort. And yet they stay because they don't have a choice. And instead of seeing that, instead of honoring the position we've put them in, we call it wisdom, and we call it consent. This is the part of transference no one wants to talk about. The horse is expected to hold the projection, absorb our grief, validate our personal myths, and do it all without ever saying no. And when they do say no, when they shut down or push back or simply stop participating in the illusion, we walk away from them and from the work. We fail to see the reality of what it means to be in relationship with something that doesn't exist for our benefit. We tell ourselves the horse is choosing us. We build entire programs around the idea that they're here to heal us. But they didn't choose this. We did. And if we're going to keep putting them in these roles, if we're going to keep asking them to witness, to reflect, and to stand beside our unprocessed selves, then we better be ready to carry the weight of our own becoming. The truth is they stay because we make it so. We call it partnership, but most days it looks like labor. It looks like being the one who never gets to leave. And if you're someone who claims to love horses, if you're someone who seeks them out in the name of healing, then you should be asking yourself this. Are you bringing your full self to that interaction? Or are you handing them pieces of yourself that you're too afraid to hold? Because they will hold it until they can't, until they shut down, until they get sick, until they become difficult or inconvenient or no longer mystical enough to justify the story you've been telling yourself. And when that happens, you'll have a choice. Do you blame them? Do you leave? Or do you stay through the discomfort, own your part of it, and deepen the relationship? Can you meet the horses without the fantasy? Can you let them be a horse, not a mirror, not a metaphor, and not a therapist? Just a body beside your own, doing the hard, ordinary work of living. I used to think my job as a coach was to help people find connection, insight, and peace. I wanted them to walk away changed because of the time they spent with the horses. I wanted to witness transformation. But I've watched too many people walk away when their projections cracked and the horse stopped offering the escape they expected. I've watched people blame the horse, blame me, blame themselves. And I've come to understand that transformation isn't always the goal, or at least it's not the horse's responsibility. What I offer now is space. Space to slow down, to feel what's happening. Space for a human to hear their own thoughts without any obligation for the horse to play savior or symbol. The horses are not tools. They're not steps in a program. They are complex, intuitive, and sometimes contradictory beings, just like us. And when we stop using them as backdrops for our self-improvement, they show us who they really are. And we are afforded the opportunity to see ourselves as we really are. My work now begins with dismantling the pedestal and letting the horse simply be. We ask harder questions. Why did you come? What are you still carrying? What are you asking others, horses included, to hold for you? I'm not disillusioned. I've just finally decided that the horses are deep healers, just not in the way we typically think. I don't promise clarity or catharsis or anything that can be measured in breakthroughs. What I offer is the chance to stand beside a horse without needing them to reflect something back. I offer the chance for you to exist inside your own body, maybe for the first time. And here, without mirrors or metaphors, you might start to see what's actually been asking for your attention all along. Not the horse. You. The industry is starting to wake up. It couldn't be happening fast enough for the horses or for the people who are finally ready to meet them without needing them to be anything else but a horse. Love, Kim.